That seems a trifle odd, but I was first ordained as a minister in the Reformed Church. Then, as a result of further study, the Bishop of Namur ordained me a priest. But in view of the persecutions then being visited on Catholics, he instructed me to keep my ordination secret. He wanted a group of priests to call upon to form a new church if the old one were destroyed. This suited me because I am not enamored of physical pain, and it seemed to me that the best way to avoid torture and imprisonment was not to let anyone know that I was a Catholic. There is also the little problem of losing my job if I were known to be a Catholic, and I haven't actually left the Reformed Church, just joined another one. I am bound to remark that matters have never come to that in my own country. The Dutch genius for compromise came into play, so at intervals anti-Catholic measures would be introduced, but nobody would do much to enforce them. We all knew the rules. Catholic churches had to be discreet, hidden in side streets, and we must not meet outside the hours of the divine services. In some cities, such as Utrecht, there was even more toleration most of the time, but at the cost of one's loyalty to the state being under question. And since it was the state that could hang you up by your thumbs in a dungeon and leave you there till you rotted, I chose not to upset it. Believe me, I've seen what the state is prepared to do to people who cross it, and while it was uncomfortable to watch, I suspect it was a lot more uncomfortable for the poor wretches who were on the receiving end. There are some difficult pastoral issues that a man of the cloth must consider when a man begs you to show God's mercy and cut his throat. In the autumn of 1674, I bade farewell to the Stadhouder and his court and returned to my chamber in Leiden, firmly resolved not to get embroiled in anything of the kind again. That Stadhouder, William III, was a nice man, pious and honest, but he seemed to regard a man's life as completely expendable when it came to defending his interests. I view things differently, especially where my own existence is concerned. I have no doubt that heaven may be wonderful, but I am in no hurry to get there, and being cornered in dark alleys by knife-wielding fanatics is not something I want to experience too often. Thus, for nearly 2 years, I lived the peaceful life of a university lecturer with all that it entails. I taught, I marked, I examined, I wrote, I studied, I ate in the refectory, despite the cavalier disregard for cookery technique and elementary hygiene displayed by Albrecht the master cook, and whenever I could slip away, I spent the evening in Jan Steen's inn on the Langebroek. I eat at the university for free, but it was worth a few stivers to eat something that had not been through the burning, fiery furnace of Albrecht's oven. And Steen's beer was a cut above the average, possibly due to the unstinting quality control he practiced personally every evening at some cost to his health. One of the effects of my service to the Stadhouder was that he allowed the rector of our university to step down, as he had been wishing to do for some time. We had not expected that he would choose to retire altogether, but he decided that he had been away from teaching for too long, so he bought a house and spent much of his time cultivating tulips. A few times a year he returned for university events or to conduct his personal study, when we would exchange some friendly words, but he seemed genuinely happy to have laid aside the burden of his office. The new rector was a man called Johannes Kochus, who was a philologian, but none the worse for that. He was a fair man who could always see both sides of an argument, and therefore had great difficulties in deciding between them, or indeed in making any other decisions. The great benefit of this was that the university's governance returned to the pattern originally envisaged, namely one in which the senior staff made their points and a collective decision was reached, with the rector acting largely as a chairman. The concomitant problem was that these men were very reluctant to discipline their own kind, as a result of which the collective decisions were disobeyed with impunity. Thus one of my own students was expelled, reinstated, re-expelled, and finally admitted to classes by the head of the school without the knowledge or agreement of the university council. I kept myself to myself as much as I could. I was, if I remember correctly, researching a particularly interesting aspect of Aristotelian eudaimonia. One day I must finish writing it up, but the project is hampered by Vandermeer's inability to spell some of the long words that I dictate to him. At the point that this story begins, I had just returned from a secret assignation with Albrecht's wife Mechthild. There was no vulgar purpose in this. Mechthild was robustly constructed and not comely in the conventional sense, but she had an angel's touch with pastry that delighted the soul, and for some reason she felt the need to mother me, frequently expressing concern that I might be losing weight. I was, but so was everyone who ate her husband's burnt offerings and had any sense of taste. Until I met Albrecht, I did not know that it was possible to burn soup. So it was from time to time Mechthild would whisper to me as she served at the refectory tables, intimating that if I came to the kitchen door at some appointed hour,